keeping safe in these the times of pandemic. As you know, the talk today is on Madeleine Smith. And should anyone not actually know who Madeleine Smith is, a very brief introduction. She was a young middle-class woman who was put on trial for the murder poisoning of her lover in 1857. So just in case anybody doesn't know who she is, that's who she is. What I'm going to do is give a brief introduction to her background, and I'll say something first of all about that and her relationship with her lover, Pierre-Emile Langelier. But the main part of the talk is actually going to be quoting from her letters, just to illustrate the nature of the relationship, the course of the relationship, and there'll be bits and pieces about the wider social context of like middle-class life in Glasgow. So, Irene, could you put up the image of Madeleine that I sent you, if that's possible? There we go. There she is. Now, I mean, who am I to judge and such superficial topic as looks? But Madeleine was described variously as beautiful, attractive, etc. I fail to see it, but never mind. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinion. This is Madeleine Smith, and actually, this photograph first only emerged in the 1990s. Before that, there had been an image of her circulated, which was of someone else, more attractive, as I would say. And in fact, even more recently, after this photograph, there was an image which was published in someone's book about Madeleine, the Madeleine Smith affair, which had the Smith family and the children all kind of named in front of the parents. And it wasn't them, it wasn't the family. But anyway, this is the real Madeleine Smith. Now, as you probably know, at this time, you probably had to stand for quite a long time in order to be photographed. Something like a count, you know, for her poise. But I would say, anyway, I better not say any more about her looks because I'll get a bad reputation for being trivial. So a bit about Madeleine's background. She was born Madeleine Hamilton Smith in West Regent Street in Glasgow in March 1835. One of her grandfathers was David Hamilton, who designed Royal Exchange Square. Her other grandfather was John Smith, who built it, not himself, but his firm did. Her own father actually was the designer of the Macmillan Galleries. So Madeleine and her three siblings, two younger sisters and a younger brother, were thoroughly Glaswegian and thoroughly bourgeois. Madeleine went to boarding school in London, and after she returned from that, aged 18, she was expected first to enjoy the very varied social life of the bourgeoisie in Glasgow, and then after that, to settle down with a suitable man, the emphasis being on suitable. However, early in 1855, just before her 20th birthday, so remember she is just 19, although soon to be 20, Madeleine met Pierre-Emile Langelier. He was a 32-year-old clerk in a Glasgow office. He'd seen her walking around in Sauchiehall Street. I don't know if you were younger, you did that thing about, you know, in my day it was Woolworths, you know, walking around Woolworths and wanting to be seen and seeing, you know, looking for talent. So that was what was really going on when he saw her walking in Sauchiehall Street, and he managed to inveigle an introduction to her. Langelier had been born in Jersey, but was generally thought of as French. He was, to my mind, he was dapper, engaging, and socially ambitious. And if Irene could put his image up for us, that would be helpful. Now, I should say my co-author, Gwyneth Nair, I wrote the book with Gwyneth, She and I disagree rather, well, we didn't come to blows about it, but she can't see anything attractive about him, whereas I can quite see how Madeleine might have found him attractive. He is a bit of a dandy, you know, if you see the sort of very, very fashionable, that what he's wearing, the way he's dressed with the kind of tie thing, you know, almost like a cravat around him. Anyway, this is longevity that Madeleine fell for. Madeleine and Emile began a clandestine relationship, which was carried on largely by letter, but they did see each other, as will become apparent. Her parents found out about this and forbade their daughter to continue to see or correspond with them. As a foreigner, and more importantly, from a lower middle class background who earned only 10 shillings a week, he was seriously unsuitable as a prospective son-in-law. Despite the fact that her parents had forbade her to see L'Angely, the couple continued to meet in secret whenever they could, and they exchanged frequent letters. Madeleine's letters survive. L'Angely's, for the most part, do not. She wrote, I think it was over 250 letters to him, all of which he kept. As instructed by him, she burnt his, the ones that she received from. So all we have of the correspondence from L'Angely's side is 2 draft letters which he kept amongst his papers. We can see from the letters that the two talk about eloping. It's really kind of a bit of bravado that's going on, because I don't think either of them would have welcomed the ensuing poverty, because her parents, you know, weren't going to support them. So because they probably never were going to elope, although they talked about it, and because her parents were not interested in her having a relationship with them, a bit of an impasse was reached. Nonetheless, the couple continued to see each other over winter of 1855, and also continued to see each other when Madeleine's family relocated to their house on the Clyde for the summer. And it was here, actually, in 1856, that the pair became lovers. Now, that was quite common. I should say something about that. The bourgeoisie in the 19th century, probably earlier, and actually into the 20th century, frequently moved out of the city, either to the seaside or to rural areas during the summer. And it would be the custom for the paterfamilias to work in the city during the week and then join the family at the weekend. Although sometimes they would actually travel on a daily basis, either by steamer or by the train. So that was quite normal. So the Smiths moved to their house in Roallan in Rue for the summer. Unusually, they actually owned this house. It was much more common for the bourgeoisie to rent their accommodation during this period, particularly when they went back to the city. They might go somewhere else. They didn't all stay in the one place. It only became more popular, common to buy your property when you move into the 20th century. So the two are writing to each other, meeting clandestinely, carrying this relationship on behind her parents' back. Soon after May 1856, when the two consummate their relationship, Madeleine's letters begin to contain references to a William Minnoch. Now, he was a Glasgow businessman and a friend of the family, and I think actually a business associate of Madeleine's father. And it wasn't long before Minnoch proposed to Madeleine and was accepted. So she then wrote to L'Angely, breaking off their relationship and asking for her letters back. L'Angely refused. Now, at first, Madeleine was distraught, pleading with L'Angely not to expose her to shame, because the letters were very frank and revealing. But then she changed tack and seemed to renew the relationship on the old basis. She encouraged him to come to see her in Blythswood Square, where the Smiths had rented the lower half of a house. And it was also where she had previously, with connivance of the servants, let him into the semi-basement area where a bedroom was. So she promised him that she would be more affectionate in future and asked that he come and see her. Now, the letters are a wonderful resource. They were written over a 2-year period, written in Madeleine's very large, looping, almost illegible handwriting. You have to stand about 6 feet back from them in order to make out what they say. They average more than 2 letters a week, and they're not only full of kind of endearments, but also the details of Madeleine's busy social life, gossip, and her flirtations with young men. But they're voluminous. And because of that, what I intend to do is just read out short extracts which chart the course of the relationship, the doomed love affair between Madeleine and Emile. So this is a part of the talk where it would be using the letters to sort of illustrate various points. Now, it was generally believed that Langeli pursued Madeleine, and he would found it attractive, but he was socially ambitious, so her social position probably was an additional, or maybe the only attraction to him. It depends what you think of that image that you saw. In April 1855, she writes to him, "Oh, accept my best thanks for your very kind and flattering note. You must have discovered that I have a great regard for you, or I would not have acted as I have done. You're wrong in thinking it was your appearance that struck me at first, although I did admire it. It was something which I cannot explain, a desire to know you. I shall tell you what I have never told you. While I was in town last winter," that would be 1854, "the happiest part of the day was when I saw you pass in the mornings. I watched you passing with pleasure." So if that's true, Madeleine didn't always tell the truth, she actually had her eye on him, as well as him having his eye on her. Throughout the relationship, Emile was pathologically jealous and very controlling. Now, Madeleine didn't passively submit to this. She was an inveterate flirt, and she took any opportunity she could to make him jealous. This is another extract from her letters. "I cannot always promise to wear high dresses. I shall not encourage any gentleman." So what we see here is her responses to what he's been telling her he wants her to do. This is where you see the controlling nature of Langeli. So she said, "I shall not go to a Glasgow ball without asking her consent. Is that fair? I cannot promise to go out only twice a week. I shall go into Sauchiehall Street as little as possible and as early as I can." So I guess he's saying you've not to go out in these streets, and certainly not during the after dark. She says, "I cannot promise not to go out with B," that's Bessie, her sister. "I shall write as often as I can and as lovingly as I can, but to tell the truth, I cannot write so lovingly as others." Again, that might be a bit of insight into Madeleine's personality. I mean, she really was a bit of a minx, and she was very aware that Langeli was jealous, and she often deliberately fanned the flames of his jealousy. For example, in one of the letters she wrote, "We had a great many friends last week," brackets, "4 young men," brackets, "Englishmen, all very tall," brackets, "but I tried not to flirt with them." Another one, "You cannot fancy how much I am engaged every moment of the day. And I have been out every night. I'm out tonight at a large dancing party. I've met several very nice fellows. I'm to meet several tonight. But dearest of my soul, I'm your own true wife." So she knew very well what she was doing. He can't go out. He can't go out with her, but he can't go out that often because he doesn't mix in the same social circles, and he doesn't have the money to do the sorts of things that she does. Now, although Madeleine did try again to get her parents' consent, they again refused point blank to allow their daughter to marry a poor clerk. Nonetheless, the relationship did continue and became increasingly intimate. Now, Victorians have gained a reputation for being prudish and sexually repressed. And in my view, that's largely unwarranted. I mean, their language, how they conducted themselves in speech was shorn of any vulgarity. And they did tend to speak in euphemisms, but that shouldn't really be confused with sexual repression. I mean, one of the most often quoted attitudes to sex in the Victorian period is from William Acton, who remarked, and this is a quote, "The majority of women are not much troubled with sexual feeling of any kind." And so a lot of what we think about the Victorians comes from that kind of view. I mean, he was a doctor. However, Acton's view was actually only one of a number of diverse views and competing views amongst medical men. For example, some medical men believed that women had to achieve orgasm before they could conceive. Others worried, particularly worried about spinsters, that lack of sexual activity could lead to hysteria and uterine congestion. So there's all sorts of views amongst medical experts. So as I say, I think the Victorians have gained an unwarranted reputation for being sexually repressed. And again, I'll just illustrate the extent to which Madeleine wasn't. She writes from next Sunday in the afternoon, I shall send out the 3 servants and only keep Christine at home. That was a servant she was particularly friendly with, a young woman, similar age to herself. You will come in by the back door, which I shall order to be opened for you, and we shall spend an hour and a half of happiness. See what I mean by euphemism? I must go to bed, were it were to be beside you. I know you would fondle me and kiss me. Another one, my husband, my own true husband, I am your wife. No one can ever separate us now. Last night I did burn with love, but we were good. We withstood all temptation. Well, it is better. Someday we may love, it's underlined, without fear or risk. We shall then be happy. Another one, darling, it is hard to resist the temptation of love, capital letters. My heart burns this night with love for you. I grow excited while I write to you. It is hard to restrain one's passions. You will love me, but I suppose I must not be too hard on my little husband, or I would kill him in no time. Oh, to be with you, to have you loving me. I fear we shall get very thin from want of sleep. And after their first sexual congress, become very Victorian here, she wrote, beloved, if we did wrong last night, it was in the excitement of our love. Darling, we were wrong, but God, I trust, shall forgive me. I loved you so. My heart burned with love for you. There's a lesson on the use of euphemism for you. Now, the following extract is from one of only 2 letters that we have from Langelier that survive, and it's in response to that letter that Madeleine wrote to him after the relationship had been, I was going to say sexually fulfilled, but I don't know. Anyway, and I think the letter gives good insight into Langelier's character. My dearest and beloved wife, Mimi, since I saw you, I have been wretchedly sad. Would to God we had not met that night. I would have been happier. I am sad at what we did. I regret it very much. Why, Mimi, did you give way after your promises? I was not angry at your allowing me, Mimi, but I am sad that it happened. You had no resolution. It is your parents' fault if shame is the result. They are to blame for it all. So he blames everybody but himself. It doesn't actually endear you to him, you know. As time went on, there was a souring of the relationship. I mean, Emile was constantly critical, constantly trying to control Madeleine's behaviour. And of course, he'd no money. And Madeleine wasn't slow to remind him of that. Dear me, Emile, have you only £50 a year from Hubbins? I thought you had 100. How could I make such a mistake? I wonder you stay for such a small sum. You should have much more. So she's kind of rubbing it in a bit, isn't she? Now, at this point in the relationship, this is when the new character of Minach appears. He was a wealthy businessman, associate of Madeleine's father. And Madeleine would have been aware that Langelier would have heard of Minach and would have heard that he was escorting her to various social events. So she tries to head him off at the pass, so to speak, by denying that there's anything in the relationship. So she writes to him, "Darling, there's an absurd report in town at present. I've heard it from many that I'm to be married in July to Mr. Minach, junior partner of the Holdsworths. But you cannot be more distressed than I am about the stories that are abroad. They give me a great deal of anxiety. I too wish not to be talked of this season. I've never given them the least encouragement. And I haven't flirted with anyone this year." And the letter's dated the 14th of January. So. Madeleine's following letters are much cooler and less frequent. It's clear that she's trying to get out of the relationship with Langelier. And Langelier is very aware of that, and of course isn't best pleased. So much so that he returned her most recent letter. And she writes back to him, February 1857. "I felt truly astonished to have my last letter returned to me, but it will be the last you shall have an opportunity of returning to me. When you're not pleased with the letters I send you, then our correspondence shall be at an end. And as there is coolness on both sides, our engagement had better be broken. And this may astonish you, but you have more than once returned my letters, and my mind was made up that I should not stand the same thing again. And you also annoyed me much on Saturday by your conduct in coming so near me. Guess there must have been a pandemic on then as well. Altogether, I think, owing to coolness and indifference, nothing else, that we had better for the future consider ourselves as strangers. I trust to your honour as a gentleman that you will not reveal anything that may have passed between us. I shall feel obliged by your bringing me my letters and likeness on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. You may be astonished at this sudden change, but for some time back, you must have noticed a coolness in my notes. My love for you has ceased. That is why I was cool. I did once love you truly, fondly, but for some time back, I have lost much of that love." Now, at first, Emile didn't reply to that letter, nor did he return her letters as she'd requested. Finally, he did write, hinting that he might send the letters to her father. Now, that sent Madeleine into a frenzy of fear. So she writes to him, "Emile, for the love you once had for me, do nothing till I see you. For the love of God, do not bring your once loved Mimi to an open shame. It would break my mother's heart. Oh, Emile, for God's sake, do not send my letters to Papa. It will be an open rupture. I will leave the house. I will die. Oh, please, Emile, do nothing until I see you. Do nothing. Oh, for the love of heaven, do nothing. I am mad. I am ill. Oh, Emile, for the love that you once had for me, do not denounce me to my Papa. Emile, if he should read my letters to you, he will put me from him. He will hate me as a guilty wretch. I loved you and wrote to you in my first ardent love. I put on paper what I should not. I was free because I loved you with my heart. If he or any other one saw these fond letters to you, what would not be said of me?" Anyway, having written that letter, which you can see is pretty frenzied, she quickly recovered her poise and she asked Emile to come and see her. Oh, she writes, "I hope to see you very soon. I want the first time we meet that you bring me all my cool letters back, and I'll give you others in their place. We go to Perth this week to see some friends. We shall be home on Monday or Tuesday. Oh, I long to see you, to kiss you and embrace you." Now, that was written on the 10th of March, 1857. On the 23rd of March, 1857, Pierre-Emile Langelier died of arsenic poisoning. A search of his lodgings revealed Madeleine's letters. She was arrested and taken into custody. She made a lengthy statement in which she freely admitted having a relationship with Langelier, admitted giving him cocoa through the bars of her bedroom window, and admitted buying arsenic on 3 separate occasions. However, she denied having administered arsenic to him and claimed not to have seen him in the 3 weeks before he died. In July 1857, she stood trial at the High Court in Edinburgh, accused of his murder. Now, the trial caused a sensation throughout Britain and indeed abroad. I mean, there was items in Parisian papers across the Atlantic and in America. It was really, you know, maybe not worldwide, but certainly Europe and North America. And why? Of course, it would be because Madeleine was young, attractive. She came from a class that was really exposed to the glare of the courts. Above all, the extracts that were read from her letters were shockingly candid about the couple's physical relationship and her enjoyment of it. After 9 days of the trial, during which it was established that Madeleine had openly bought arsenic, but crucially could not be shown to have had the opportunity of administering it to Langelier, a verdict of not proven was returned. Now, you're probably aware that that is a peculiarly Scottish verdict. I mean, there are many in the legal profession and outside it who would say, well, isn't not proven not guilty? It's not what a trial's not meant to do, prove you guilty. If you're not proved guilty, you're innocent. I think it was Jack House that framed it as, we think you're guilty, but we can't prove it, so go away and don't do it again. But anyway, she was found not proven. But although Madeleine walked from the Edinburgh courtroom a free woman, her reputation was ruined. The trial had been so sensational that the name Madeleine Smith was known throughout Britain, and indeed beyond, as I've suggested. Even those who believed her to have been innocent of murder knew about the letters, knew intimate details about her physical life, knew that she had broken the ultimate taboo of Victorian morality, and worse, enjoyed doing it. So after those shaming letters had been read aloud in court and printed in every newspaper, despite her show of insouciance at the trial, she might well have wanted to hide. What we know is that she headed first for the family home in Loo, and she stayed out of sight there for quite a while. She then vanishes from any official records. We don't really know what happened to her. We can only make guesses. But she surfaces again in July 1861 when she married George Wardle in London. Now, Wardle came from a prosperous silk manufacturing family from Leek in Staffordshire, and he was just beginning to work as a designer for William Morris. Now, it wasn't that the Smith family had disowned Madeleine. Sometimes it's said that, you know, that they did sort of never darken our doorstep again. But they hadn't. I mean, she was in continued correspondence with the family, and her father was at her wedding with George Wardle and had given her a dowry of £3,000. And depending on which measure you use, that could be anywhere between 150,000 and 200,000. So I wouldn't mind falling out with someone and being banished from the door if they gave me that, you know, when I got married. So she had a fairly hearty sum. The couple, George and Madeleine, were both in their mid-20s by this time, and they settled down to life in Bloomsbury. 2 children, Tom and Mary, were born. And in 1870, George became manager of Morris and Company. As you know, they were designing and producing wallpapers in the arts and crafts style. George and Madeleine moved in artistic and literary circles, where Madeleine's past wasn't hidden. It was generally known about, but maybe not spoken about. And Madeleine was apparently a very chic hostess whose dinner invitations were sought after. I think it was Madeleine who introduced the fashion of having table mats. I'm sure that's the case. So they mixed with people like William Morris, obviously, Daniel Gabriel Rossetti, but the guests also included people like Edwin Burne-Jones and George Bernard Shaw. Now, many of that circle were actually politically aware and politically active. And as he grew up, Madeleine's son, Tom, took up left-wing causes. And she joined him in his membership of Morris's Socialist League. And her name, by this time it's Lena Wardle, often appears in the minutes of meetings. And Bernard Shaw, who knew her pretty well, said that she was an ordinary, good-humoured, capable woman with nothing sinister about her. And later reminiscences of her at that time said that she was, quote, gay, lively, and beautiful, and an enthusiastic advocate of socialist gospels. No attempt was made to conceal her identity. It was an open secret, well known to the members. That's someone who was a member of the Socialist League that was writing. But by 1890, George and Madeleine seemed to have drifted apart, and he went to Italy to study architecture. In 1893, at the age of 58, she decided to make a fresh start, and she boarded the SS Arizona in Liverpool on the 11th of September to go to New York. Now, her son had already emigrated there with his wife. Well, they went separately, but I think they were both there by this time. Taking full advantages of the opportunities offered by such a departure, she declined to tell the authorities her marital status or her real age, which she claimed was 36 rather than 58. In New York, she could reinvent herself, and indeed she did. She began a new relationship with a man over 20 years her junior, a William Shea, who was a concrete contractor, born in New York, but of Irish extraction. I don't think they ever married. There's no evidence that they did. And by 1910, Lena was passing herself off as 45 when she was actually about 74. Quite how she explained this to her son, Tom, who was 47 at the time, is a bit of a mystery. But anyway, she seems to have done it. George Wardle died in Devon in 1910. His will was scrupulous about honouring the provision that he had agreed to make for, quote, his wife, my wife, Madeleine Wardle. That had all been set up in the marriage settlement, which had been drawn up 50 years before. So he observed that. In 1920, Madeleine and she, or Lena, as she called herself, were living on 8th Avenue, New York, and she gave her age as 57 rather than the real 85. Now, she did wear hennaed wigs, but you wouldn't have thought even that would make her look 30 years younger. But she did remain alert. She dealt with her own correspondence. She stayed in touch with the family solicitors back in Scotland. She died in 1926. Madeleine, on the other hand, lasted until April 1928, aged 93, although her death certificate says 66. She had outlived all 4 of her siblings who had spent their lives quietly in Falkirk. I don't think you have much option but to live quietly in Falkirk, but anyway, and none of them ever married. It's ironic that it was Madeleine, who, if not a murderer, was certainly immoral by the standards of the day. It was Madeleine who enjoyed a long, varied, and enviable life. I think that's it. I think that'll